Okay, so this is a talk in two parts. It deals with both of the Oxpecker species. The red-billed and the yellow-billed, it's different stories, but for both of these species, it's been a real conservation success story, of which there are not too many these days. So we'll start with the red-billed Oxpecker. Thanks. Yeah, so red-billed Oxpeckers were wiped out through large parts of South Africa, mainly by cattle lipping. Okay, so yeah, and not only because the dips were toxic to the birds, but they also killed off their food resource. So large parts of South Africa, red-billed Oxpeckers were wiped out. Yeah, let's go. So the poisons also killed the birds. Okay, that was the range in 1963 from the old Roberts. McLaughlin and Lindsay Roberts, 1963 distribution. Thanks. That was in 84 from McLean's version of the Roberts. So, next one. In those areas, apparently the range had been contracted. So, large areas of South Africa, Oxpeckers were wiped out. Okay, up until the early 1980s, all wildlife belonged to the state. If you were a farmer and you had impala or springbok or something on your land, it wasn't yours. So you weren't allowed to hunt them without a permit. And so most people, most farmers considered wildlife on their farms to be vermin. But eventually, thanks. In the early 80s, the legislation passed ownership of the wildlife to the landowner. And that had a huge impact on the wildlife industry. Suddenly, it became a valuable asset to farmers. And it led to a massive expansion in the wildlife industry. And as we see it today, it is huge. So the problem with it is that you can't dip wildlife. This led to huge problems with ticks on wildlife. So the natural solution was red-billed Oxpeckers, and it was reported in the literature that they can take up to 12,500 tick larvae per bird per day. So you can imagine the effect that they can have. Or 100 engorged ticks. Bringing ticks back to the nest. So it became an extremely attractive tick control option to all wildlife farmers. Yeah, okay. So in 1988, the Wildlife Society approached Sandparks. They wanted Oxpeckers for the Van Laver Nature Reserve, which is again right up there in the northern Transvaal, near Louis Trevor. Okay. And so we conducted the first capture operation in July 1988. So we first started by putting a poor old donkey next to a dam, surrounding him with mist nets. It worked a little bit. We caught a few birds because they were interested in the donkey. But the problem is dams are not good places to capture them because there's water everywhere. Next one. So wherever you set up your net, always somewhere else for the birds to go and drink. A little bit of disturbance and then they push off to the other side of the dam. Okay, so we moved the operation to reservoirs, which is a much more focused operation, must be the dry season, so the birds have to come to these water points to drink. Couldn't be any other drinking options nearby, and so focused operation that the birds had to come and drink, so okay. So they drink very early in the morning for the first time, so we had to get the mist nets up by sunrise. That led to some very early mornings. Okay, once the nets are all up, then we go back and have breakfast and wait for the action.
What if it beers and cobalt?
Okay, they like to drink from the reservoirs actually, they're all Kruger. So they actually prefer to come and drink at this reservoir instead of going down to the drinking trough. Because they've got very sharp little claws and they can actually cling to the inside of the cement of the reservoir. And even if it's half full, they go down on the wall and go to the bottom. Okay? So they arrive at the windmill or a dead tree nearby. And then they kind of come down to drink. They look around first to make sure it's all safe, and then they come down to drink. So yeah, they can cling to the surface of the reservoir. So we would put up a mist net on their path from their perch to where they go. And this worked pretty well. So here we had a really good pole. There's our Jeff Lockwood. He was a real stalwart in this operation. So quite a mission to get those nets up that height. And to get at the birds, you've got to actually bring the nets down and take them out one by one.
And the box?
The bites. Okay, so then we put up mist nets around on three sides of the reservoir, which was much more successful. Okay? So they couldn't go around the nets, and some of them would even try and go right round and drink, which they did, and then we would learn to make a disturbance, which chased the birds back into it. So it was a process that evolved over time. These are them. They're real little forests, actually. They make a horrible screeching noise, and those claws are vicious. Just by gripping your hand with your fingers, they draw blood with those claws. They're so sharp. But they're fantastic little birds. Okay? Now that's getting birds out of the mist net. Jeff Lockwood again. There's a young Jeff Lockwood. 1988 version. Okay, so we measured every bird. Each one got a colour ring, which designated where it had been caught, and then a stainless ring with a number on it. Each bird got a ring. Then we had a young male, 1988 version.
Gorgeous ship.
And we would put the birds in these little muslin bags, take them out of the net, put them in the bag for processing. And there's our young daughter. So there were anything else, you catch not only oxpeckers, we get doves, and we got the odd brown-headed parrot, even a little sparrowhawk. And so they were all ringed and released. The oxpeckers were kept in this keep net, which opens at the bottom and then they go to the top. And then we'd hang it over the bucket of water. They're amazing. They settled down immediately, just went straight down to go and drink from the water. They were not fussed or phased at all. Okay?
And why did you do that?
So they could drink. Sorry?
Wouldn't they have gone like that?
And we prevented them from drinking, and they like to drink, so yeah. Okay, so the birds pretty soon learned to go and drink at the trough when there was this disturbance. So that needed another modification. Yeah. Okay. So there we've got the nets up. This also had its problems, because you can see all those guys standing around here waiting to come in. And a volunteers in the mist net is not a good idea. Goodbye, mist net.
Yeah, whereabouts was this done?
All within sort of driving range of Skukuza. We had the moment at Skukuza. So. Okay. So buffalo, you don't want a buffalo in a mist net either. So we got this whole big chasing on the buffalo.
Is he
Quite
throwing
nice to have the
stones?
buffalo there though, because they're full of oxpeckers. Okay, so this is the boma that we had in Skukuza. It was donated by the Honorary Rangers. They've got Chris Pierce and Steve Ingram put it all together, and they came down and assembled it at Skukuza. It was really a fantastic addition to yeah, so many thanks to the Honorary Rangers. Okay, that's a horrible photograph, but that's releasing birds into the boma from the holding net, the keep nets. That's Kruger's right, the bed. So we had these poor donkeys that we started off putting the food, ox blood, mince, and our vitamin, and we packed it on the donkey's backs. It was fine for oxpeckers, but it was not so good for the donkeys.
We weren't had a hand up for animal abuse.
Well, you'll see. Okay, so They are really vicious little birds. Donkeys are quite soft-skinned animals, actually. They would open up sores on the legs and all over the place. And they would then pick away at the blood and the flesh once they opened up. So it was terrible. It became so eventually, for humane reasons, we stopped putting dogs. So we got smart eventually, just put the food in bowl. So they got very tame in the moment. Eh? This is torture. That is torture. Those little claws. Yeah. Sure.
Don't you think it's child abuse? Whose kids that?
That's my son Leo. Okay, so once we caught the last bird, we tried to catch 100 birds, for each capture operation. So once we caught enough birds, 100 or so, then they had to be in quarantine. It was a veterinary requirement that they be held in quarantine for 14 days. So once the 14 days were up, we would have to go in there in the dark with a torch, and it was very easy. You just walk up and pick them off. It was very easy to catch in the dark. Okay. So, just a bit of a torch. Okay, then they were loaded in crates. Most often they were flown to their destination, but sometimes they went by road also. So that's Peter Hartley. Those birds are on their way to Italia and Natal. And then they would release the birds just open it up with their next one. We try and get them close to a host species, so that they would immediately go down onto a giraffe or a herd of buffalo, or perhaps some rhino or something like that. But these poor animals, they've never been experienced oxpecker before. It caused panic every time. Even giraffe would run away, galloping and kicking. It was amazing. So in 1995, we went up to Kruger. We were trying to catch yellow oxpeckers for a translocation to Marikele National Park. So that was not successful. We didn't catch any yellows. So in all the time that we were doing red-billed oxpecker capture, we only ever caught 2. And that was done, which program? Caught them just north of Skukuza there. So we just ringed them and released them. Yeah, in 92 we caught red-billed oxpeckers at the same place, they were released in Songamvela. A year later, we caught a couple of them back when they come. So they returned. 120 kilos. It's not very far for a bird fly, but it's all more the same. Okay, so next one. This is just in all we caught 861 birds, essentially 16 different destinations. It's all of them. The Popo Collins, Eastern Cape, Songamvela, the Popo, KwaZulu-Natal, Marikele National Park, some of the local conservancies also, Tembe Elephant Park. So 861 birds of course. So there's a few more talents in that. Okay, so that's the destinations that they went to. So this, I think, has had a huge effect on the distribution of oxpeckers. Next one. That was the Bird Atlas in 2014 showing the distribution. So all of these outliers here, I'm sure, came from our translocations, and they've done even more of them. They've done so well. Everywhere that they went to, Addo National Park, everywhere. I thought they wouldn't do in Addo because there are no real trees there. But they happily nested in fencing posts, and so they made a play. So every one of those translocations proved successful. And also one of the big things nowadays is they've got bird-friendly dips, so it doesn't kill the birds, but it does kill the food resource. Okay, so that was the distribution of oxpeckers in 1963, and then was 1984, 2014. Okay. So they were at one stage considered vulnerable. I think let's go on. Yeah, near threatened. That was their assessment in 2000, and the most recent one in 2015. They are now least conserve. Just thanks to everybody that helped with the project, particularly Jeff and Cynthia. They were there every year. And Rick Jenner is just a private guy who's just keen. He just came every year to help. There's a couple of names you might recognize.
Peter Lawson,
Probably Peter. You remember that, Peter?
I do.
Okay, yellow oxpeckers. Next go. Yeah, until 1985, yellow oxpeckers were considered extinct in South Africa. There were no records of yellow oxpeckers anywhere. The extinction was thought to be caused by rinderpest, funnily enough, which wiped out its host species, particularly buffalo. And at the same time, Tsetse also died out. They were disappeared from Kruger for some time. Luckily, they have never returned. But they survived up in Gonrizo in the old Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. But the problem with them was that was distribution in 1984. And you can see there's Gonrizo, that little area there. Because of cattle dipping in the area. Next slide. No, that's it. Gonrizo. So the theory is that there was cattle dipping going on around Gonrizo, which prevented the birds from still using the toxic tips. So they were never able to recolonize Kruger, to escape from Gonrizo and come to Kruger. Okay? But during the bush war, the cattle dipping broke down. That really was dipping cattle in that area. And so the yellow bulls were able to expand their range out of Gonrizo and into Kruger.
One advantage of the bush war.
The bush war, yeah, one of the few advantages. So up until 1980, there was a chap, Johan Stadtheim, I'm not sure if you knew him, but he was sadly killed in an aircraft crash flying a census in Etosha, I think it was. And he could never find the yellow oxpeckers in the park. He did his PhD on oxpeckers, but he could never find the yellow ones. So he was, up till 1982 when he was killed, he would regularly visit Kruger, but he still couldn't find the yellow ones. So he never got to see the yellow ones. But in 1984, tourists found a nest near Kunda, which confirmed their presence, and everybody knew them as they were there. So at that time, Jeff Lockwood was busy with a capture operation up in Kapili. The idea was to reintroduce them into Kruger. But just then we found the nest there, so we thought it doesn't make much sense to bring possibly a different genetic strain and release them in Kruger. So they were never brought to Kruger. They went to the Natal Parks instead, up here to Kruger in Polosi. But they just disappeared there. That was not successful, that translocation, which surprises me.
Yeah.
Maybe the reserve was just too small and cattle were going out. Anyway. So in 1985, we were doing the census, and we were kind of thinking about yellow oxpeckers, and this is only Johan Kloppers, who is now passed away. He was head of conservation at the time. And he asked me, how do they differ? How would one know the difference? So I said, well, I know that I didn't know them well at all in those days either. So I told him that I thought they had a conspicuous pale yellow rump. So he said, you think we'll see them from the helicopter? We would go down on the herd of buffalo for census purposes. We'd split the herd into groups like that. So that we would now count those for the census. So he said we should see if we can't. As you go over the herd with the helicopter, the oxpeckers come up in a cloud. So he said to the pilot, or Peter Otto, he said, chase the birds and let's see if we can see them. And sure enough, the red bill has a very dark rump, and the yellow bill has a pale rump. Which is very, very easy to see actually. So even when they perch on a buffalo, we've got it back to you, you can usually see that pale rump, which is very distinctive. Okay. There you can see it on there. Okay, so after that, it was right at the beginning of the census, so we went in and we checked the first next buffalo. We went down and had a look. They came up on a cloud off the herd, and people chased them down or followed them, and sure enough, there they were. There were many of them. So then, we were absolutely astounded. So we checked every herd after that. Okay. So this is in 1987. We did it every year after that. So this was in 87. This was the distribution of them. These closed circles were buffalo herds with oxpeckers, and the open circles are buffalo herds without oxpeckers. So that was the distribution of oxpeckers as far as we could determine in 1987. So there were some people didn't believe we could oxpeckers from a helicopter. So Warren Carlton meant to take on us.
Was that him hanging out the helicopter?
No, that's just a photo of a helicopter. Yeah, so he was able to confirm that we were not taking guys talking rubbish. So it's an interesting question. In 1980, Johan had failed to find yellowbills, and he was a very good bird, and he was intensely, passionately interested in oxpeckers. But yet in 1985, they were suddenly fairly common in the northern parts of Kruger. How was that possible? How did they get there so quickly? Did he miss them? It seems unlikely. I don't think that Johan would have missed them easily. But there they were. So they must have recolonized Kruger fairly quickly, and I think that's probably true. But it remains a bit of a mystery. Why did we miss them for so long? So that was the distribution in 84. No yellowbill oxpeckers in 94. I think 87, that was the pattern. By 2014, this was from the Herd Atlas project. And that's now
Wow.
And I think you can see them anywhere. Anywhere in Kruger, you find a buffalo, have a look at them. They are everywhere now. It's just the most amazing story.
Do you need to interview to the government?
Well, I don't know if anybody's ever looked at it, but they have a very strong affinity to buffalo. So you can almost not find a buffalo herd. If you look for a yellowbill oxpecker, you will find one.
That's a magnificent buffalo.
So check every buffalo. And in 31 years, they went from locally extinct to least conserved.
Wow.
Thank you.
Right, time for questions. Who's got some questions? There we are, starting from the bottom.
Are there any relocation programs within us?
There was one done later, and I'm not sure how many birds were caught or where they were. But I don't think that's good. I'm sure there wouldn't be no problem to get.
I looked up, I'm trying to find information for I and I tried to get some information on it. It does seem that there's an area required before we can do this.
Well, it would have to be a fairly sort of significant conservation or concerns. I know there was a requirement that all the farmers in the area around about had to convert to those bird-friendly dips. So, but theoretically it's still possible. I'm not involved in it, so yes.
Is it true that the oxpeckers used to or the main animal was it on the large buffalo?
Yeah,
But they're moving to feed off chicks on much smaller.
well, the red bulls are, you see them on the show. Some animals you don't easily see, hardly ever see an oxpecker or a wildebeest, and a nyala and a horseback. They just, for some reason, they just don't seem to go there. I'm not sure what that reason is, but the yellowbills like the thick-skinned animals. giraffe and buffalo in particular, and rhinos. So, but the red bulls, there's a different feeding strategy. The yellow bulls are very, you can see the bulls, quite powerful, quite large and powerful. So they can pick the bigger ticks off. Whereas the yellow bulls, the red bulls, they do what they call scissoring, and they work through their hair. They pick up all the tiny little tick larvae. And as we said there, they can eat up to 12,500 of those a day. So it's a different feeding style and it's slightly different feeding niche.
Who saw that? Who did you say? Anthony Martin?
Anthony Hawthorne,
Okay, Martin.
he was improving.
At what time? What year?
In early 80s. So long.
Are they the only, those two species, are they the only family that does that? I mean, does anything similar appear?
Well, some of the starlings apparently do that also. And apparently somebody saw an Indian miner riding around on the back of an animal.
But in terms of somewhere like America with things like bison and buffalo, is there anything?
So Duncan might have a better idea.
Have they got ticks and bison?
I'm sure.
Yeah, if there's Lyme disease in the States, there have to be ticks. But I don't know any specialist tick eaters other than the two, which are in their own family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family. Yeah.
They're closely related to the starlings, but it's not.
Yeah.
If they can get it, they can come and boss
For a lot of money.
Not on
Dollars.
Someone told me this morning that Kruger are now killing by Indian miners in Kruger.
I wouldn't be surprised. There should be.
They are, what's the thing? They're killing Indian miners.
No, they're shooting them.
Yeah, well, I'm sure
Did we shoot them in Gloucester?
Yes.
You used to. You used to.
The other thing is you're not allowed to discharge a firearm in the hospital. So it's a problem.
Yeah.
But we saw them up at Pumbury the other day, right up at Cook's Corner, inside Cook's Corner.
I just wanted to, I was fascinated. I was taking photographs of an Oxpecker on some animals. And I was clicking. And I literally switched it on to video. And that's where I learned that
A scissor.
they don't just click, they actually
They work
really accidentally.
Nick was just telling me that he saw a whole bunch of Indian miners just inside Pabeni Gate,
Yeah, it was about 15. One
feeding with impala.
So like I said, they were Dixie and far from This might be a bit of an ignorant question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When Oxpeckers were so well distributed over South Africa, why did the farmers have to resort to dips when they were already such an effective antidote to...
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's a good question. They're still dip all the time. Ticks are a problem, but I don't know that ticks, Oxpeckers won't control the tick problem. They'll help, but they're not going to eradicate ticks. And ticks also are disease carriers, so that's another reason to want to get rid of them.
I can just say something on the use of chemicals. The 80s were a time when chemicals were at their heyday. It was seen as the thing to do. From our own industry where I work, it was really a time when chemicals was absolutely the flavour of the day. And the chemical industry promoted their products quite aggressively. So the farmers would buy into that and thought it was the thing to do. And it's only generations later that the real farmers realized.
Can you remember ever seeing ticks on elephants?
No, there was
some Oxpeckers on elephants.
Yeah, there was a paper that was done by, I forget his name now. They were up in Chobe, when it got so dry up there and the elephants were pretty much dying there. And they were so thin and emaciated, there were elephants with lots of ticks on them, and they recorded Oxpeckers on those elephants too. The way it's going in Kruger, we'll probably have Oxpeckers on elephants. Yeah, sorry, he's had his hand up a while.
Yeah. Historically, there was a hell of a lot of DHC and DDT used, especially in northern Antarctica, from 65 chronic disease. I think that's where it all started. And they used to have regular arsenical dips and everything used all through South Africa to control parasites on sheep and cattle and all that. So it goes back many, many years.
Long history. Very Duncan.
Yeah, just quickly, from an atlasing perspective, we've been following the spread of yellow bulls. Not red bulls. Red bulls are documented, but from the inception of setup 2, in the Mpumalanga, we designated yellow-billed oxpeckers as a regional rarity. So anybody who accessed the yellow-billed oxpecker in the Mpumalanga, you used to get a out-of-range film. Even if it had been seen before, you used to get. So we've dropped it now. But because of that, we've been actually following the progress. Peter and myself, and previously Duncan Christie, we've been following the progress of yellow-billed oxpeckers spreading south. And now we know they're actually breeding along the Crocodile River. We've got that documented now. You can drive into Monalan Gate, and the first herd of buffalo you could now see. But interestingly, south of that, they're not spreading at all, because you've got sugarcane and large settlements between southern Kruger's boundary and Swaziland, Eswatini. So there are a few private reserves, we know Morrisdale and others that but the spread has abruptly halted southwards, but it has not halted westwards. So now we've got records as far west as Karongwe Game Reserve, which is, as if you know the road from Bleda to Tsini. Off Kalaka, that sort of bottom area. They are now not breeding records, but they are site records of yellow-billed oxpeckers. So what they've done is they realized that, well, we can't go any to the south, so they've gone westwards. It's brilliant. Ross Hawkins several years ago reported them breeding in Sabi Sands, and I'm sure Neil as well. And now they're regular in Salati Game Reserve, which is there near Gravelot. And now there are sightings of them at Karongwe. And those are all private reserves, privately owned, with populations of large mammals. So they've populated westwards, which is great. So they've almost reached the start.
Unbelievable how well they've done.
Amazing.
And
it's such a success story, and I'm very glad you highlighted it. The second thing is I wanted to ask you about. There's a guy that's doing research on yellow-billed oxpeckers in Kruger. I forget his name.
Haupt or something like that.
Yeah.
I think so.
And he's been saying that. Well, I don't know if he's actually the one who's revealing this, or if he's sort of passing on information. But the fact that red-billed oxpeckers roost at night in trees or palms, as you know. But the yellow-billed oxpeckers are actually roosting on the hosts at night. They actually crawl under the hosts, and they tuck themselves in, and they get warm from the hosts.
And that's why herding big day, really was done and driving around on cart on.
Yeah,
we saw them on buffalo. In fish cart, we perched on the buffalo.
And they were roosting on
the back. We saw them on the back. But
okay. So if it's warm, maybe it's in the back. But if it's cold, I don't know. So you've seen it?
Yeah, I've definitely seen it.
Verified.
Like the one year that was the only yellow bulls we saw at night on buffalo.
That's amazing.
Sure.
My question is,
But I answered your question, did I?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, that's all kind of area. It's unusual to see more than 2 pairs or 3 pairs on a whole river of yellow. So if you, the further north you go is
There's probably a higher density because that's where.
so the ratio would be that.
Yeah. But I find that if you stop at the herd of buffalo and you just look long enough, you're going to find yellow dogs there. Just about every herd.
Yeah, it was an exceptional sight.
If the yellow bull has a specialized host, like the elephant, the thick-skinned animals, when you go west, where do they find? Because most of those are antelope and things like
zebra
that.
and rhino and giraffe.
But they like giraffe.
Sorry?
They do like giraffe.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
That was fascinating.
Absolutely.